Welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans, a Wayfolk Arts podcast, with your hosts, Hannah,
Phil,
Jackson,
and Maddie.
Happy Pride Month, everybody.
Hello.
Jumping in right off, I want to let you know we at Wayfolk Arts are an inclusive community. One of the pieces of that is that we are affirming of LGBTQ plus folks and their full inclusion in the life of the church. We recognize that some of you out there might not be at that place, but we are. And as it's Pride Month, this felt like a really great and important conversation for us to have today. So we look forward to having you along for the ride.
Yes, indeed.
And we hope if you're not there yet, you will feel safe enough to stay.
we would like you to stay.
See, we want to be inclusive of all folks in our conversations. So we're going to seek to do that. The kind of overarching thought in today's episode is, what does it mean to be intentionally inclusive, particularly focusing on the LGBTQ plus community, but I'm sure our conversation will go beyond that too. And what do we need to be thinking about in order to continue to grow in our inclusivity and our hospitality in the ways we think about and plan our worship?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think what's unfortunate and painful about the church is it's sometimes one of the least inclusive spaces to LGBTQ folks, historically and presently. It's the reason why denominations split. It's why people leave churches, plant their own churches. It's unfortunately a lot of the trauma stories of people who feel like they're not allowed to go back into a church. Just lots of painful things that have happened to LGBTQ folks.
It's really alive, I think, culturally, and very alive local culturally. It's tied up in our local politics right now, in the kind of big denominations of our area, the RCA and the CRC. RCA has been through some conversation in it, and it's maybe settled a little bit. The CRC has made some big moves that have left a lot of folks trying to figure out if their church can stay their home church, what it means for them, sometimes professionally, what it means for their family.
And those of us in the PCUSA are nestled quite warmly in our affirming situation.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
UCC and the Methodists are all over there going like, have fun, everybody.
Right.
Well, and the PCUSA was formed out of a division
Very like this one.
because of same-sex marriage and also female ordination. And, even your most affirming denominations had to have the really hard conversation at some point. And the reason they are what they are today is because they probably broke off from something else.
Probably as a setup thing, Maddie, before we jumped in, you were talking a bit about Pride Month and what it's about and what we're doing with it.
I just thought maybe we could give a little bit of a background of what is Pride Month. So it's June, the whole month of June. The reason we engage Pride Month in June is because we're kind of remembering the Stonewall riots, which, if you don't know what those are, surprise, surprise, they were riots and protests that occurred out of response to police violence. If that is a surprise to you, wow. Sorry, yikes. Wait, I looked up the year because I was actually surprised. I thought it would be more recent, but no, 1969, June 28th, 1969, is when a police raid occurred, and then the Stonewall riots protests kind of rippled from that happening. So we remember that historic event, and then it's a time to be really intentional about celebration of human sexuality and raising awareness on inclusivity. It's a time of celebration and protest and education.
Yeah. And it has felt to me really aligned with who we are called to be as the church, people that sees the humanity in everybody, but also in particular individuals. That Christ came as a particular human man. There was we had the privilege of ordination exams.
Yep.
This was that this week.
This last week, yeah.
And some of the answers were really making me think about that, the particularness of the incarnation and what that means in the celebration and the image of God and all of our particular humannesses. And
meaning Jesus came as a particular man at a particular time in history.
Right, right, with probably particular favorite foods, and
we worship a particular God.
With personality and idiosyncrasy, and all of us have those too, and that doesn't make us less than.
Right.
Yeah.
And also the particularity of God becoming human means that humanity and all...
Rather than a dinosaur.
Right, or rather than a dinosaur, yeah. Right, that'd be a whole different story. But all facets of humanity matter to God because God took on humanity. Yeah. So,
well, I guess I'm going to take us off on a whole tangent, but technically we wouldn't really know if God didn't also
come as a dinosaur,
or a dog, or also a bird.
I will be honest, that came up in me too.
Yep. We don't really know.
The very Christian answer of "Were you there?"
Were you there?
But
can you read dinosaur?
I wish. Anyways, that's a different episode.
We'll do the dinosaur episode another time. But yeah, maybe we start there. Like, why does inclusivity matter in the church?
I think certainly what came to mind as I was thinking towards this episode is the inclusivity, especially around words. Because Wayfolk Arts and Liturgical Shenanigans is a podcast about words and the intentionality of having words well made and welcoming to people. And I thought about some of your comments early on in this episode, Maddie, around like church has typically been a place that is not a hospitable place. And some of that is because it's some of it is intentional, but also some of it is unintentional use of archaic language that people can't find themselves in.
Right.
So it's really important when you're, engaging a song, engaging anything in sort of a communal space, to think about the language that you're using and to wonder if the liturgy that you're writing, the liturgy that you're using today, is in fact excluding someone as a result of its either archaic language or just its accidentally exclusive language.
And I think too, I want to be careful to honor tradition. I want to believe that part of the reason why we all tend to get really defensive about changing the language in hymns or prayers is because it feels like a big part of our tradition.
Yeah. And
tradition is beautiful. I also think it's important to name that oftentimes tradition is harmful because it's born in a time where groups of people are being excluded and harmed because of race, gender, sexuality. So tradition is not in and of itself bad, and new tradition is also not in and of itself bad. Yeah. Nor are we dishonoring the past.
Well, I would almost, and I'm sure there are ways we do it that is dishonoring, but I would almost contend that as we play with it, we're honoring the tradition. Like when we look at the teachings of Jesus, right? Jesus is riffing on centuries of tradition and stories and proverbs, right? And then twisting them.
Right,
yes.
yeah.
And changing a significant word or flipping two things around. And that's not him like, I can't believe he's desecrating that. It's reframing it in a way that makes us see better what was there and question our own lenses and filters. So for me, that happens, when a song is happening and I'm singing it from memory, and now they're singing something different here. Maybe they've picked a more gender inclusive word, or even replaced like a hymn with God or something like that, and I suddenly notice, that makes me call into question this rut I have been in without thinking about it. And now I'm seeing what I'm saying more clearly. I don't know if that's true for you.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Well, it makes me think of like, the hymns that we think of as traditional now, or the creeds that we think of traditional now, are doing that in their moment as well. Yes. They're re-vernacularizing, they're re-contextualizing sola scriptura into something that people can understand in their moment. Yeah. It's been a couple hundred years in some cases.
They used to be new, and they're not anymore, but they used to be.
As is our translations of the Bible.
Yeah.
If you are so privileged to learn biblical language, I mean, well, I won't speak for you. For me, I was shocked by how different the literal or it's not even possible to literally translate some of the Bible. The English translation is just not quite the same as what the initial intent was in so many of the places. It's Pride Month. So example, the word homosexuality, I hate to break it to you, it doesn't exist. We put it in there.
In the Bible.
Oh, so sorry. Holy cow.
In the
word
biblical
exists.
languages, that's not
I promise. But it wasn't in the biblical language. I think the word itself didn't exist until the 1970s. Homosexual.
In the
English language.
Bible that it was.
I meant the English language.
In the English language, I don't know that answer.
I have no idea.
Well, maybe we can fact check ourselves, but it definitely didn't exist in biblical times. The word that is both in the Greek and the Hebrew means something very, very different that has much more to do with using sex for power and manipulation than it does for human sexuality.
So maybe I want to go back to the original question about like why does inclusion matter? And we talk about like the ways we think about that, whether it's in the words we choose or these sorts of things. But what are the stakes? What does it mean if we're a church we just keep doing things? It's been working the way it's been working for a long time. Why now? Why focus on this?
I think that one of the reasons it feels so important to me to pursue inclusivity is when it changes your relationship with God and with the church and with yourself. If you can see yourself in the liturgies, in the prayers, in the scripture, in the songs that you sing, if you can engage those things and go, oh, this is about me. God loves me. God entered into these particulars to engage my particulars. It changes everything and empowers people, I think, in a different way than the exclusive language does.
And I immediately was thinking of as you were talking, the exact flip side benefit too of if I can see me in the other. So if, like you're saying, you come to this church, this worship space, whatever, and here are words that maybe for the first time you can be on board with, and that you're like, this is not shaming me or condemning me in some way or excluding me. I am part of this group. And that we don't think of it as we want to be welcoming to these sinners, so that they might hear the truth and become we, but recognizing the we is already we, and that person who is other than you is the same as far as the image of God, as far as being siblings, as far as having a place at that table together.
Well, and I think we've done ourselves a disservice and made it much harder to see ourselves in the biblical narrative because we want to take what's written on the page so literally, which wasn't intended that way. Hebrew people were much better about sitting in the space of, this is a story and what have we learned about God in this story, not did Jonah actually get eaten by a whale. Or a big fish is what it actually says. So sorry, Hebrew people that are yelling at me in the background.
Dog gadol. Because dog means fish.
Yep.
Which is really funny.
So it's probably a dogfish. And I think of how many times have I heard families that I've worked with, people that I've done ministry with say, I just cannot see myself in the Bible. It's not relevant to me. Therefore, why would we not use more inclusive language so that you can see yourself in the stories that you absolutely are included in?
Yeah. Yeah, at some point it becomes why not? Like why would we not want to provide a hospitable space for people to engage?
Well, let's engage that question.
Yeah.
What do we think is a motivating factor behind churches that may make that decision?
I think part of it is tradition, like I said earlier.
Valuing tradition?
Yep, this is or just the it's always been done this way. I also think some of it is feeling, whether this is named or not, ill-equipped or not allowed to change something that we view as so sacred and holy. It most likely feels blasphemous, deeply disrespectful, and I get that, and I will name that I often don't feel like I'm allowed to even sometimes interpret biblical texts. I mean, I went to seminary and have preached sermons, and every time I come to the text, I say to God, "Are you sure? What am I allowed to say in this space?" So I think it's fair, and I want to believe that is good intention.
Yeah, sure.
I also think some of it is hate-fueled energy, right? It becomes this us versus them. These people are bad people, and they shouldn't see themselves in the biblical narrative because that means we're affirming a reality that is wrong. And by doing so, we're participating in the wrongness of it.
And I think we've talked before about the relationship between hate and love, right? That it's not apathy. There's intense feelings here. And I think the us versus them is a helpful thing to remember, because I don't know if often it's felt as a them focused thing as much as it is an us thing. You know, like, this is who we are called to be, and this is the values we are called to have, and they are against it. And so we, out of defensive love, protectiveness of this thing we care so deeply about, we want to resist that. And that makes sense to me too.
Yeah. The times I've been exclusive, because I mean, a lot of my own story of Christianity is at one time I really did believe homosexuality was one of the greatest sins, and I struggled with my own identity because of it. People that seemed to be much more informed than me, were smarter than me, told me that was true, and who was I to question that? I was taught as the student from the teacher that this was correct. So I just have a lot of empathy for that posture.
Until other annoying teachers wouldn't give you clear answers.
You wouldn't! Phil would not tell me what he thought and
kept kind of saying like, "Oh, you think that? That's interesting. You might want to look at this book." You know, I don't know.
Drove me crazy.
Well, that might be a good segue into how have we found ways we've all worked in extending the hospitality to broader folks, broaden those people who can find themselves in liturgies. What are some ways? Say you manage to get across the bridge where you, as a church, as a consistory, as a group of people, say, "Yeah, I think this would be good to kind of work as a church, as a community, or as a faith community, as a gathering space, to be more hospitable, to kind of be sure that we are inclusive and welcoming." What are some ways that you have found that work for that?
Yeah. Well, right off, I brought a few things. I came with a mountain of like books and papers today,
which you can all see.
Which you can all see. We're gonna in the description have some links to some resources and such that we have found insightful and helpful. And I would so love you to share resources that you have found helpful. Help us all grow. Let's work with each other. One thing that's pretty cool. I go to Hope Church here in Holland, and I loved this the first time I went. There's name tags available, and it's those standard blue name tags. And the reasoning behind that was, a lot of churches will have their more permanent name tags, and there may be a very clear outsider insider with that a new person wouldn't have that. They would have. So the idea is everybody has sticky name tags. And,
sticky.
Right, you know what I mean?
They're not permanent?
No, they're stickers.
Oh, you write new on them every week?
Every week, so that there's not a difference between someone who came for the very first time and someone who's been there.
If something changes.
If something changes, yeah. If you want to go by a different name, nickname, you're allowed to do that. And the other thing that's really neat is there are little circle stickers with pronouns on them. She, her, he, him, they, them are the 3 options there. And the sign by the name tags says, I made a copy of it and brought it, please write your name. Those who wish to can affix a sticker with their personal pronouns to their name tag. And then those options are there. So there's that optional nature to that. But a lot of people do it, recognizing that it's not just if it's going to be a surprise to you, we do it. That if I have he, him there, it makes it more permissive for other people to do that.
Right.
And then there's a note under it. To read more about why we invite people to list personal pronouns, please see the article entitled Non-Binary Gender and the Diverse Beauty of Creation, which is a Christian Century essay. Looks like it was published in 2018, and you can find it. It's written by Austin Hartke, Hartke, which is a helpful way to think about how we use pronouns in worship.
I love that that's an invitation. I was saying this before our podcasting began. If I freak out every time somebody asks me what my pronouns are. I have a personal crisis. And I think part of it is because I don't want to put myself in a box. I also genuinely think I just don't know. And then when someone asks me what they are, I go, oh my goodness, what are they? I'm not sure. Because there are some things I would rather be a king than a queen.
Yeah.
I would rather be an emperor than an empress. I would rather you give me the male title, but I'm not sure how much of that is about power versus gender. But I always panic. So I would be someone who wouldn't want to put pronouns on there, but not because I don't want to know other people's and honor them well. I don't know.
Yeah. And maybe you don't feel safe in the community yet to do that.
Yep.
And that permissive language allows you to enter into the space at your own pace and your own level of vulnerability too.
And I expect, kind of firmly declares to someone coming in for the first time that this isn't a hurdle that you're going to have to figure out how to jump here. I do this in my therapy practice. In the intro, I like to say, like, hey, I'm Phil, he, him pronouns. How do you like to be addressed? And because I've said that, they don't have to go. Because a lot of times when LGBTQ plus folks, especially gender diverse folks, are going for worship, entering into a new community space, particularly in a healthcare setting, they've faced non-welcome before. And so are entering it with guardedness and walls up, looking for the signs that they're not going to be excluded or punished for what they reveal about themselves.
So I have friends in the medical industry, and I remember when some of them were going through their education, they had to take, it was like a day lesson. It wasn't even a class. They had a lesson in one of their courses specifically on how you needed to be asking your patients their preferred pronouns before they came into the room. And one of my friends said, this is such a waste of time. I'm not going to ask someone their preferred pronouns when this is so dumb. And I kind of was like, well, why? Is it because it makes you uncomfortable? And they kept saying it just feels like a waste of time. And I said, but you take their health history. Why would you not want to ask them how to help them feel safe in your office? And that kind of made them pause. And the defensiveness still existed. Sure. But was that part of, like, did you have to take any kind of lesson where it's an expectation that you have to ask people their preferred pronouns?
For me, we definitely have cultural competence is a huge piece of the the ACA, the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics and Values, which is what I'm a part of. There's not specifics on how you do that, but there's lots of trainings about becoming more culturally competent, and this, I believe, would fall under that. And as the church, to me, like as a care practitioner, yeah, I want to be that for my clients. How much more? How much more should we as God's people? Yeah.
It goes, Jason, I think you said this earlier. It's the why wouldn't we want to be as inclusive as possible?
Yeah.
That question of why would you not want to do what you need to do to make your patients feel safe? Why would you not want to do what you need to do to make your brothers, sisters, siblings in Christ feel safe? It doesn't, personally, I don't understand.
So flipping things for a second here, I think it's very true. I know it's very true that when we introduce this kind of work or these kinds of potential thoughts, it makes a lot of people feel very unsafe who are already there. That this is somehow changing what church is.
Change is hard.
Changing what the core of their beliefs or values or ethics or what they think a family is or all kinds of stuff. And in making it safe for some, at least in the short term, it will be making it uncomfortable and unsafe for others. Yeah.
With the hope that someday, hopefully soon, you'll get to a point where the circle will extend wider rather than shift one way or the other.
Well, and if I want to get on my high horse about it, I'm like, let's look at Jesus' ministry. How many people did he make feel unsafe?
Right. The path of the gospel is to.
And it was the people who were already entrenched in religion, in society, in the power structures that felt very unsafe and excluded by how Jesus engaged with folks that they would rather step over.
And actually, Jesus, in some ways, was purposefully exclusive in the way he spoke in parables.
Yeah.
This is so that they won't understand, which is gross. I have a really hard, no, truly, I have a very hard time with those passages in the gospel stories. But it exists. It's a thing. Oh no, I had a thought and it flew away.
About how we might make it unsafe for others?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's okay. Maybe it will come back.
Well, I was going to name one more thing about things I've thought about in my practice. I get to share an office with a couple other therapists a few days a week. And it was important to me if I had an office where I was seeing clients because I have a strong sense of calling, passion to care for LGBTQ plus folks, especially those that have had church hurt, that I want my office to yell that this is a place where you are wanted and welcomed and has been set apart for you. So there are symbols there of queer pride and such. And so, but I wanted to make that clear to the other therapists who might be using it. Hey, if you're going to be using the space, it's going to have these things here,
bright.
Because I recognize that there are. I don't think any of the therapists that I practice with would be put off by it in any way, but there are therapists who see clients that would no longer be a place where they would feel safe to process some of their own stuff. And so I think for me, knowing that there are other spaces that are safe, other practitioners, other churches that are caring for that group of folks. When I feel called to care particularly for a marginalized group, it gives me the permission to kind of say, okay, the church is bigger than me. This is how I feel called to love and embrace.
My thought came back.
Okay.
But I can hold it if you...
I don't.
Okay. I think another reason why we hesitate to talk about, to be inclusive in regards to human sexuality in church, two things. We like to exclude politics, and sexuality has become such a political thing. Also, I don't know, this is becoming a louder discourse, unfortunately, politically. Talking about human sexuality often tends to equal in people's brains talking about sex and having sex. And if I disclose my sexuality, I'm disclosing and talking about my sex life. And when I was in youth ministry, I hesitated for a long time to disclose my sexuality because I was so afraid of someone accusing me of having some kind of inappropriate conversation with a child. And I remember the first time I disclosed, I'm bisexual. So the first time I disclosed that I'm bisexual to a student and their parent was because the student came out as bisexual, and the parent was talking about how this was a really emotional thing for the student and they felt lots of shame. And I said, well, if it's helpful for them to know, I'm their youth pastor and I'm bisexual as well. And I said, it's not a secret. You can tell whoever you want that. I'm married to a man, so I appear to be straight. But there's a hesitancy there. And unfortunately, I think it's a rightful hesitancy with what's occurring in places like Florida, where we're being told that by being gay and talking about being gay, we're somehow like it being involved in some kind of pedophilia with kids, which is disgusting and absolutely not true. Right. You are talking about a piece of your identity. If you make it a sex thing, that says more about you than it does about me. Right. Additionally, if you get to talk about your relationships and that's not a sex thing, why is it any different for me or anyone else to talk about our relationships? However, unfortunately, the fear is valid because people are accusing LGBTQ identifying people of that,
grooming and such,
and of grooming, of harassment, of all of the things that suck to be accused of as an adult that works with kids. So I also want to name, if you are someone who is affirming and you are hesitating to use inclusive language, to do things like put pronouns on your name tag because you're so afraid, that fear is allowed. You are allowed to do what you need to do to feel safe. And I hope you're not hearing this as, if you're not a space that uses inclusive language, that means you're not affirming or you're bad or you're contributing to this bad thing, because who are we to say why the space isn't doing the things? Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, to take us back to that I don't remember who asked the question, but the things we need to consider in order to to practice inclusivity in our spaces. We've talked about pronouns, or just like how we engage other people physically in the space. What might we do in the words of the liturgies and prayers themselves to make it a more hospitable space?
Like a lot of stuff that we talked about in seminary, so let me name that. Thinking particularly about your congregation is huge. This is like a reason why we tend to write sermons and not just read the same sermons over and over, or someone else's sermon, because a sermon or any worship service is at a particular time to a particular people. And so I think as you craft your liturgies and as you write prayers and as you speak extemporaneous prayers and write sermons, that we're thinking about who is receiving this and who God has gathered here, and are there words that they can hear that are, that name them, the stories that they can see themselves in. Otherwise, why are we doing this?
Right.
Yeah.
I think too, just thinking through why the liturgies you use have the language that they do. When I had to write my statement of faith for the PCUSA, I was told to actually be really careful about how I gendered God, because however I chose to gender God, I was going to be asked about it. And that made me really pause and think, why do we refer to God as God the Father? And so I added the line, referred to as Father by Christ and so too by us, right? So does it mean it's wrong to refer to God as God the Father? That's biblical. And also there's images of God as mother in the Bible. So even just simply looking through what you use and the whys behind it, and if your whys align with the values of you and what you believe the Lord has called you to preach, and the values of the people and the needs of the people that you are being hospitable to, lovely. And I think that that's a really brave kind of conversation to have with your liturgy.
Yeah, and especially that why can't, in order to do the work that Maddie is inviting us to, the why can't be an accusatory why. Like,
Right.
why do we do it this way? It has to be.
It may have sounded accusatory coming from me, and I didn't mean it that way.
It did not.
It didn't.
Didn't,
But I think if it is often my impulse when I'm asking why to be like well, if I'm asking why, that means it's wrong.
Right.
That's not why we ask why. We ask why as an act of curiosity and compassion to just learn more about what we're doing so that we can do it intentionally rather than blindly.
And also simply asking why tends to, well, one, oftentimes unravel like an argument that you think is coherent or reasoning that you think is coherent, which then may send us all into a panic. Also, it may lead to some beautiful self-discoveries and a more meaningful conversation with your liturgy, with your people, with yourself, with the Lord.
Which is true of almost any time we hit discomfort, right? If we can lean into that with curiosity, we're going to learn something
Instead of judgment.
So if I go to a worship service and it opens up with a prayer to Mother God, and my body goes, "Whoa, no,"
But why?
let's check in with me. We can ask them too why they did Mother, and I'm sure we'll learn some really cool theological stuff about the work they've been doing. But I think there's more interesting work for me anyway, checking in about what did that just bring up for me and what I believe about God and what I don't believe about God, what I think God is limited to. For me, a lot of the pronoun use or metaphor use around God that maybe uses gender expressions that I didn't hear growing up suddenly make me realize, oh, there's a box that I had God in that I need to remove. Or I would like to, that I want a broader view. I want less restrictive lenses here. I love one of the other things that Hope Church does is it has two versions of the lyrics to the doxology, and people sing both, and it's fine
at the same time. It's really
and
cool.
it's
I've
the
been there.
Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Creator Christ and Holy Ghost, and that's fine. And who is that for? Well, there's lots of folks that have had very problematic relationships with a father figure, and the word father is going to be hard for them to sing in a loving, worshipful way, especially at the start of any work that they're doing on that. And might they be able to reclaim that word and use it down the road? Sure. Is that necessary for them to have a growing and vibrant faith? No. So let's not have a word like that has multiple meanings in our language be a hindrance to someone being a part of what we do in worship.
Yeah, because again, it's that question, why would we not continue to do the things to help people feel safe when we know the barrier exists?
Yeah.
We can't know everybody's triggers all the time. That and nor should we feel like we need to, right? We're not responsible. What a weight to bear if we were responsible for every single trigger. But that feels like such a simple one to allow ourselves to be kind of responsible for, at least in terms of just trying to eliminate it as much as we can.
Yeah, and especially to know, going back to what Phil said earlier about knowing your people, if you know your people include people who this particular thing would be a trigger for, you can adapt the language to make it more hospitable for your people.
Yeah. There's one more thing I want to say on that, and we're probably landing near time, aren't we?
Pretty close.
So this is a thing I want to at least have said is, well, when we think particularly about who our congregation is, you don't know.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, like, you know, Maddie's pastor is probably not going to know her sexuality because she's married to a man. I'm also bisexual.
It's called bi-erasure.
People aren't going to know that. We call when you're married to someone of the opposite, like cisgender, and you're bi,
straight appearing,
the ring of invisibility.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have this and I'm with a woman, you'll never know. And the thing is, you wouldn't. And so you might say things that are deeply painful and harmful to me without knowing, assuming we're the same. My most moving story for me with that was in the youth group that I used to lead, and where one young student came out as trans to me and another student. And the other student who was with us said to her, you know, I'm so proud of you. this is a safe group, meaning our youth group. Phil is safe. This church is not safe.
Yeah.
If you want to find a church where you can share that part of you and be involved in worship, I can help you do that. And so could this kiddo come and worship with us on Sunday mornings? Sure. Could they share that piece of them on Sunday mornings? According to my other student, no. And so a lot of folks, I think, have the choice between losing their community and revealing more of themselves and allowing themselves to be seen.
Yeah.
And our choosing to be inclusive invites people to show up with less filters, to show up with less shame, and to be part of the family.
Yeah. And if that's you, that feels like you're not allowed or not safe enough to come out, I don't know. I think it's important to take a moment to honor that. If you're deep in shame that somebody else put on you, and you're forced to be closeted, or perhaps you've tried to come out and somebody pushed you back inside, I'm so sorry. And I'll name that there are ways that I have absolutely contributed to closeting people in my own Christian past, and that makes me sad. And it makes me sad that spaces continue to be that way. And if you're somebody who left the church because of that and you're not ready to come back, that is okay. And I hope that you have spaces on that journey that you are safe to get to be you and get to. We're all supposed to be naked anyways. Like God said to Adam and Eve, who told you you were naked? I hope you get to be naked with people. And I don't mean that sexually. I know in my own story, finding people that were like, I see you, of course, this is okay. Yeah. Please be unabashedly yourself with me. That was so freeing. And even as someone who is publicly out, there are spaces in my life it is not mentioned, and I do not mention it, and it would not be allowed to be mentioned, and that is still painful for me. So I honor you for that space you're in, and I see you, and I grieve with you, and I will continue to apologize for the ways I've contributed to that. Yeah, we hope you feel safe here in this space.
Yeah, and so with that, if you're in a place where you aren't able to have those kinds of conversations or be heard for pain that you've experienced or longings that you have, jump on our Discord maybe.
Yeah, Discord's a great way to do it.
Especially if you live geographically near us, definitely have some groups and such we could point you toward that could be a good growth or even just healing space. And if you're not, just as happy to help you find some of those wherever you are. Yeah. This is something we care a lot about.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you can find us on the Discord. You can find us on the Instagram. Hit us on any of the messages there. You can find us on our website if that's a route that you would rather use as well. But yeah, reach out. We'd love to chat with you.
Come be naked with us.
Well,
what do you mean? Well, emotionally naked.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't change my words to make yourself more comfortable. Sorry.
I did a sermon or a youth group thing that was like it was youth group.
You did a youth group thing about being naked together.
Well, we called it No More Fig Leaves, and we talked about how like with the coming of sin, with the eating of the tree, there came this like shame, and that the work of the Spirit and the work of Christ and the work of Christian community is to slowly disempower that shame and come to believe that we can be
everything I
naked
mean
and
when
unashamed.
I say.
Yeah, the things that we think are gross about us.
Yeah.
Are not, that we are lovely and we are wanted and we are welcome.
One day when someone wants to cancel me and say every reason why I can't be a pastor, that will be what they take out of this audio. Me saying come be naked with us.
And then we'll play the rest of this to clarify.
Yeah, there you go.
Right after you're like, we're not grooming.
Oh, Phil.
I'm sorry.
Y'all are on a one propeller plane that is like badly coughing. My goodness.
Jackson has so much editing.
I think we're in the after show now, right?
Yeah.
I think so. Welcome to the after show, everybody.
No, we need to land the other
didn't
plane.
land it.
Okay.
I think
so
we could.
We landed on a nice tender moment hours ago.
Jackson will make it so there's this nice cut,
Okay.
and then our friends will jump in wherever the.
I have a question though.
No.
Not that sort of a question. There's crisp. Does anyone want some now or later?
There's apple crisp.
It's not apple. It's rhubarb and
It's just
strawberry.
butter. It's my
There's
favorite.
not butter.
I
in
would
it.
That
love
sounds
it.
great.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to this conversation on liturgical shenanigans. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it around to other people who you think might enjoy it as well. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the places. You can find us at the username Wayfolk Arts. And if you're looking for a way to get involved with the show a little bit more, head on over to patreon.com/wayfolkarts, where you get to hear more of the show and get access to a bunch of other patron-only posts and things like that. Thank you all for tuning in. It was a delight to spend some time with you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.